He nodded. He remained silent when they took the price off him. He considered himself modest until he realized he had simply disappeared. And then one day, instead of answering, he left a compass. They always say things like that when they think they've won. Work hard and you'll have bread. It rolls off the tongue like a principle, like gravity, like something no one questions anymore. But behind that phrase hides a belief older than all our labor laws, older than reason. Know your place. Stay where they put you. Smile while you do it. That manager didn't invent anything new. He just inherited the voice. The same voice you heard at school when you spoke too loud. The same tone behind, "Be grateful." And that mechanic, I remember the look in his eyes. It wasn't confusion. It was something worse. It was the look of a man who believed it, believed he deserved less because he didn't wear a tie. He didn't argue, didn't flinch. He nodded. And that silence, that quiet submission, stuck with me more than any courtroom speech. I could have said something. I had every tool, years of law, rhetoric, precedent, justice in 100 cases where men thought they were gods just because they had a desk and a salary. But I didn't open my mouth. Instead, I reached into my pocket, took out a small compass, placed it on the table. Then I walked away, because there's a difference between making noise and making sense. He needed direction, not another debate. He needed to remember who he was before the world taught him how to obey. And I think you do too, not because you're weak. No, far from it. But because you've been surviving for so long, you forgot what it feels like to live on your own terms. No one teaches you that silence can be resistance. They tell you silence means agreement, weakness, shame. They never mention that silence can also be a boundary, a statement, a compass placed gently on a desk that says, "I will not play your game. I don't need to explain myself to you." There's a kind of power in that, the kind that doesn't need an audience. And you've been quiet in all the wrong ways. You swallowed things you never agreed with, smiled when you were disrespected, helped people who never once looked back to ask if you were okay. You called that strength. It wasn't. It was habit. And habit is just pain with repetition. You were trained to believe that being liked is more important than being respected. They convinced you that love must be earned, and earned only through sacrifice. So you started sacrificing yourself, bit by bit. Too loud? Tone it down. Too ambitious? Dial it back. Too emotional? Lock it up. And now you don't even know where you end and the performance begins. Let me say it clearly. You are not too much. They were never prepared to meet someone who doesn't beg for permission. That manager, he'll have bread. But bread without dignity is just another leash. That's not what you came here for. You were not born to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Your purpose is not to decorate a man's life while yours fades in the background. Your value isn't a discount code they get when you say yes too easily. And don't tell me you're fine. I see it in people's eyes, that flicker of exhaustion they mistake for peace. You're not tired because you did too much. You're tired because you spent too long doing the wrong things for the wrong people and called it loyalty. There's no medal for self-erasure, no reward for being palatable, just silence, and not the good kind. You deserve better than that. But you won't get better by hoping someone notices you've been bleeding under your smile. You'll get it the moment you realize you don't owe them softness. You owe yourself honesty. The compass? It wasn't just for him. It was for me too. A reminder to myself after decades of watching the system sell obedience as virtue. Leave when the room no longer respects you. Speak only when your words aren't currency for approval. And above all, never confuse survival with purpose. That's how you find yourself again. That's how you remember that being silent doesn't mean you've lost your voice. It just means you're done explaining it to people who never cared to listen. This is only the beginning. What comes next will cut deeper, but it's the kind of pain that finally sets you free. I've seen it happen too many times. A woman gives everything she has, time, energy, silence, her gut instinct, just to be left with crumbs. Not even the kind you can collect with dignity, just what's left over after everyone else has taken what they wanted. They don't say thank you. They don't offer a seat. They just nod and move on, because they were never taught to value the woman who stands in the background, holding the weight of everyone's comfort. Not once did anyone stop to ask what it costs her to keep it all together. They see the patience, but not the pressure. They enjoy the kindness, but ignore the fatigue behind her eyes. They call her strong because it's easier than helping. And the worst part? She agrees with them. She tells herself, "This is who I am. This is what love looks like. This is how women survive." No, it's not. That's how they keep you small. They don't need to chain you. They don't even need to yell. All they have to do is feed you a lifetime of half-truths. Don't be difficult. Real women make it work. You're just sensitive. Stop overreacting. It's not that bad. He didn't mean it like that. You should be more understanding. And so you shrink, one boundary at a time, not because you're weak, but because you were taught to fear your own strength. Because every time you tried to take up space, someone made you feel like you were selfish. Because you wanted peace more than you wanted to be right. Because deep down, you believed that being alone was worse than being invisible. Let me say this clearly. That was never love. That was control dressed in compromise. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. And I know you learned young. You were probably the one who cleaned up the messes, smoothed things over, stayed quiet so the room wouldn't explode. You became good at not needing anything, at reading the mood before the door even opened, at softening your tone so others wouldn't feel challenged. But what about you? Who ever softened their tone for you? Who stopped to read your face? No one. That's the problem. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people. And over time, you convinced yourself that asking at all was the mistake. So now you pride yourself on not needing help. You wear independence like armor, but underneath it, there's still that wound. What if I stop pleasing them and no one stays? Let me break it to you gently. Yes, some people will leave. That's the point. Because the ones who only loved you when you were bending don't deserve to be there when you finally stand. You've been trained to be the emotional airbag, to absorb the hit, cushion the blow, keep everyone safe. But you're not a safety net. You're not their rehab center. You're not here to regulate their chaos while yours goes unattended. They called it selflessness. But what it really was, emotional servitude. And before you ask, no, it's not your fault. But it is your responsibility to wake up. Wake up to the fact that you never needed to prove your worth through suffering. That not all silence is noble. That not every apology is yours to give. That peace built on self-denial will always collapse. You've been negotiating with guilt for too long, lowering your volume to avoid conflict, wearing shame like it was part of your outfit. But ask yourself this: who told you that love means enduring? Who made you believe that being chosen was the goal? And why did you stop choosing yourself? No one ever warned you how addictive approval is, how easy it is to confuse validation with value, how quickly you lose yourself when your worth depends on someone else seeing it. But they never see it. Not really. Because the people who benefit from your silence will always label your truth as an attack. And the moment you speak, clearly, directly, without flinching, they'll call you difficult, cold, too much. Let them. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them fumble when they can no longer use your silence to protect their ego. Because the woman you're becoming, she's not here to be liked. She's here to be whole. She's here to live a life where she no longer needs to shrink to be safe. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer. You don't have to fix everything. You have to stop accepting what breaks you. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You have to respect them even when no one else does. I've been in rooms full of power and seen women disappear in front of me, not because they were invisible, but because they were trained to vanish to make others feel bigger. Not anymore. Not you. You didn't come this far just to earn their tolerance. You're not a placeholder for someone else's comfort. You're not here to carry guilt for finally saying, enough. Start saying it. And if your voice shakes, let it. If your hands tremble, let them. Because the shaking means you're finally stepping out of the mold. It means you're breaking free from a role you never agreed to play. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the life you were always meant to live. The one where you don't apologize for existing. The one where you don't trade truth for closeness. The one where being alone isn't terrifying. It's liberating. They told you that silence was grace. What they didn't say is that silence can also be survival instinct and eventually a weapon. Now you get to choose. Will your silence be the prison they gave you, or the exit you build with your own hands? Because here's the truth no one tells you. Bread is fine, but we make the ovens. Now comes the turning point, the one truth you've been avoiding, the one that finally sets the boundaries you were never allowed to have. The next part doesn't comfort you. It wakes you up. If you've ever nodded your head when everything inside you was screaming, subscribe. This channel isn't about advice. Here, we talk about things that are usually kept quiet. If you were moved by the story about the mechanic, the compass, and the bread, write in the comments, I know how to keep quiet too, but now I want something different. We read every word, and you are not alone here. People think pain has a sound, a scream, a cry, a crack in the voice. They're wrong. Real pain is quiet. It doesn't beg to be seen. It hides behind functioning routines, polite smiles, well-chosen words. It's invisible because it learned long ago that nobody listens unless you bleed loudly. And even then, they still turn away. I remember a woman once came to me asking for legal advice. Her husband had taken everything, the house, the savings, even the narrative. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. She looked at me and said, How do I prove I'm not crazy? That's what they do, you know. When they can't control your body, they go for your mind. They don't break you. They confuse you. They call it love while they take your power piece by piece until you start apologizing for needing anything at all. The law has words for theft, for fraud, for violence, but it has none for this kind of slow erasure. That's why I quit practicing law the way they taught me, because there are things the system doesn't see, but the soul does. There's a reason I left that compass. It wasn't some poetic gesture. It was confession, because I too stayed silent when I should have spoken. I defended others, but not myself. I carried wisdom like a shield, thinking it would protect me from heartbreak. It didn't. It only made the heartbreak quieter. You see, there's a kind of dignity that kills you slowly, the kind that whispers, endure. Don't lower yourself. Don't show the pain. And so you don't. You just endure beautifully until you disappear. That's what I want to tell you now. Endurance isn't always virtue. Sometimes it's slow suicide wearing pearls. You thought your silence was noble. You thought keeping peace meant you were strong. But all you did was make it easier for others to forget you existed. And that's the cruelest way to vanish, not by death, but by compliance. I've seen too many women mistake exhaustion for maturity. They say, "I've learned to accept things as they are." No. What you've learned is to suppress the rebellion that once made you alive. You buried your fire under layers of patience and called it wisdom. But real wisdom doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't demand that you dim yourself to stay safe. It expands you, even when it hurts. You ask me, how do I find myself again? Start by admitting the cost of everything you called survival. Every time you stayed silent to avoid a fight. Every time you laughed at a joke that insulted you. Every time you forgave too soon, just to stop feeling alone. Every time you explained your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Add it up. That's your bill. That's the price of silence. I know you don't want to hear it, but peace bought through silence is never free. You pay for it with pieces of your identity, with the little instincts that used to tell you this isn't right, with the small voice that once said, I deserve more. Until one day you wake up and it's gone. You don't remember what you like. You don't remember what you need. You only remember how to adjust. That's the tragedy of good women in bad systems. They adapt too well, and when they finally break, everyone acts surprised. Why didn't you say something? They ask. Because you did, just not out loud. You said it with your body, your fatigue, your forced smile. But nobody listens to the quiet ones until it's too late. Let me tell you something I learned too late myself. If you don't speak your truth, someone else will narrate your life for you. And they'll do it badly. They'll call you fragile when you're just tired. They'll call you bitter when you're finally honest. They'll call you cold when you've simply stopped performing warmth for the ungrateful. And here's the cruel irony. When you finally do speak, they'll say you've changed, but you haven't. You've just stopped lying. They'll say, you're not the same person anymore. Good. You're not supposed to be. I know what it costs to walk away. I know the silence of an empty apartment after decades of endurance. I know how heavy it feels to lose people who only loved you when you were easy to control. But I also know this. There's no loneliness worse than the one you feel while surrounded by people who don't truly see you. So walk away if you must. Don't make a speech. Don't justify. Just take the compass, your inner one, and leave quietly. They'll talk, of course. They always do. They'll say you're dramatic. They'll say you're ungrateful. Let them. Because the same people who told you to work hard for bread never understood what it takes to build the oven. You don't need their permission to rise. That's what my father used to tell me. Bread feeds the stomach. Truth feeds the soul. Never confuse the two. Took me a lifetime to understand it. The world will always reward compliance. It keeps the machine running. but freedom. Freedom has no applause, only clarity. And clarity is a quiet revolution. When you stop performing, when you stop explaining, when you stop trading your peace for acceptance, something inside you wakes up. It's not dramatic, it's not cinematic. It's a subtle click, like a compass needle finding north. And in that moment, everything you've lost begins to make sense. You realize the silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It was the pause before you remembered who you are. And when that happens, you stop asking, "Who will love me if I change?" You start asking, "Who still loves me now that I've stopped pretending?" That question will show you everything. You'll lose people, yes, but you'll gain yourself. And that's not loss. It's resurrection. You're not here to prove you can survive without love. You're here to prove that love is possible without losing yourself. That's the difference between existing and living. They told you to work hard for bread, but bread alone is never enough. You are the fire. You are the hands that shape the dough. Without you, there is no warmth. Never forget that. This is the truth you've been avoiding. The next part, part 4, is what happens after you stop enduring. It's not about pain anymore. It's about rebuilding. But to build something real, you must first face what you destroyed to stay small. Ready to see what happens when silence turns into strength? At some point, the collapse becomes quiet. There's no dramatic door slam, no loud goodbye, no final scene. Just a woman standing in her own apartment, hearing the silence for the first time, and realizing she doesn't need to fill it. That's how it begins. Not with rage, not even with pain, with space. For the first time in years, you can hear your own thoughts, and they don't ask for permission anymore. It hits slowly, like the first breath after a storm. You don't even know you are holding your breath until you exhale, and nothing cracks. No backlash, no retaliation, no punishment. You thought the world would collapse when you stopped performing. Instead, it paused. And in that pause, you begin to see how many things you called love were actually just fear wrapped in politeness. You wake up and realize you don't miss them. You miss the role you played. You miss the version of you that knew exactly what was expected, even if it cost you everything, because being needed gave you structure, even if that structure was a cage. But now the role is gone, and what's left? You, the real you, the one who always knew she wasn't built for obedience. You used to whisper your truth into the dark, hoping someone would hear it and still stay. Now you say it aloud, knowing some will leave, and you're fine with it. That's not coldness, that's clarity. You no longer offer discounts to be loved. No more apologizing for how loudly your heart beats. No more softening your needs to keep peace. No more shrinking into relationships that only bloom when you disappear. That kind of love was theft. It looked like care, but it came with a receipt. "Here's everything I've done for you," they said, "and here's who you now have to become to keep it." You paid in silence, in self-abandonment, in nervous smiles that hid the storm. Now, the payment stops. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of you they only want when convenient. You're not an emotional buffet. You're not a therapist for people who refuse to heal. You're not a peacekeeper in wars you didn't start. You're not a translator for people who never tried to understand you. Let them misunderstand. Let them complain about your tone, your distance, your new boundaries. Let them miss the version of you who tolerated what should have never been normalized. You're not here to make them comfortable. You're here to be free, and freedom doesn't always feel good at first. because now the silence is yours, and you can finally hear what's underneath. The old narratives still echo. You're being selfish. No one else will love you like this. You're too much. You're going to end up alone. You hear them, but they don't stick anymore, because somewhere along the line you stopped asking what it would cost to walk away and started wondering what it's costing you to stay. That shift? That's power. Power is not volume. It's not dominance. It's not control. It's the ability to walk into a room and no longer beg to belong. It's the refusal to explain your no to people who never respected your yes. It's showing up whole, not in fragments, and letting others decide if they can handle the fullness. They rarely can, but that's not your burden to carry anymore. You've learned how to hold space for yourself, to say what you mean without decorating it for approval, to sit with discomfort without abandoning your truth. You used to believe that love meant compromise. Now you know. Real love doesn't require disappearance. You don't need to fix their wounds to deserve intimacy. You don't need to bleed emotionally to keep someone interested. You don't need to adjust your shape to fit their inability to hold depth. You only need to remain rooted in what's real, even when that means walking alone for a while. Aloneness is not emptiness. It's the return to self, the part of you that was buried under roles: caretaker, peacemaker, provider, listener, the one who always said yes before she knew what she wanted, the one who smiled when she was unraveling, the one who feared that honesty would cost her everything. Turns out, honesty only cost what wasn't real. You grieve the illusion, but then you breathe, and for the first time in years, the breath doesn't tremble. Now you look around and everything is quieter. No background noise of managing everyone's emotions. No low-grade anxiety of whether you're too much. Just you, without the need to audition. The compass points inward now. It no longer spins wildly when someone disapproves. It stays still when they question you. It doesn't move when they leave. That stillness, that's your center. And you didn't earn it by being agreeable. You earned it by finally telling the truth. I'm not here to be convenient. I'm not here to be manageable. I'm not here to be small. And now you no longer apologize for what you know. You don't ask for validation before setting a boundary. You don't second-guess your needs. You don't explain why you're done tolerating the bare minimum. You're not waiting for permission to take up space. You take it because you know what it cost to give it away for so long. This isn't revenge. This isn't anger. This is reclamation. This is what it looks like when a woman comes home to herself, not with fireworks, not with applause, but with a quiet certainty that says, I'm not broken, I was just buried, and now I'm back. The final part is not loud. It won't offer victory or revenge. It will offer stillness, a kind of truth that no longer needs to be spoken to be lived. The ending isn't about what you win. It's about what you finally stop losing. There's a moment no one prepares you for. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with applause. No one will be there to celebrate it with you, because it happens in silence, and by then, you're already used to being alone. Not the lonely kind of alone, the clear kind, the kind where you're finally able to hear yourself think, and you realize you like what you hear. No self-doubt, no inner critic rehearsing every failure, no tension in your chest waiting for the next interruption. Just breath, steady, unapologetic. You're not waiting for anything anymore. Not their message, not their recognition, not their remorse. You stopped hoping someone would come back and undo what they did. You stopped fantasizing about the perfect confrontation. You stopped needing closure from people who were never open to begin with. That's the ending no one writes stories about. The quiet one. The one where you don't need a breakthrough, because nothing is broken anymore. They told you life is about winning, about achieving, proving, becoming. But the truth is much softer than that. You don't need to win, you just need to stop bleeding. And you have. For the first time, you're not calculating how much of yourself you need to cut down to be safe. You're not managing their emotions like a full-time job. You're not building bridges to people who only burn them the moment you ask for something real. That labor is done. The performance is over. Now, you simply exist. And it's more than enough. You sit with yourself and feel full. Not because everything is perfect, not because pain disappeared, but because you no longer confuse pain with purpose. They always told you to be strong, but they meant be quiet. What they feared was not your strength, it was your clarity. Now, you see things without distortion. You look back at who you were and don't flinch. You don't feel shame. You feel compassion. That version of you, the one who begged to be understood, who waited by the phone, who stayed longer than she should. She was not weak. She was surviving. She was loyal in the only way she knew how. But she's gone now, not erased, integrated. She lives in you as memory, not identity. Now, there is a steadiness to you, not hard, not armored, just rooted. You say no without guilt. You walk away without explanation. You rest without earning it. You speak, and if your voice trembles, you speak anyway, because the truth matters more than being liked. You used to fear silence because it meant rejection. Now silence is your home, your clean slate, your place of power. You no longer see solitude as a sentence. It's a sanctuary. You don't flinch when someone doesn't choose you. You already did. That's the shift. That's the quiet transformation no one sees coming. The world keeps spinning, but you no longer spin with it. You move differently now, slower, with intention, not to impress, not to prove, not to compensate, just to live on your terms. You're no longer addicted to potential. You're not waiting for someone to see your value. You are no longer someone's emotional investment, waiting for a return. You know your worth, not because someone told you, but because you finally stopped selling it at a discount. What they think? Not your concern. How they label you? Not your weight to carry. Whether they come back? No longer a door you stand by. The version of you that over-explained is gone. The one that feared being misunderstood? She no longer runs the show. Now, you're understood by the only person who ever needed to get it, you. And when people ask what happened, why you're different, colder, sharper, lighter, you won't have an answer they can digest. Because there was no event, no betrayal too big, no moment of rage, just quiet, just the soft realization that you don't have to bleed to be real, that you don't have to earn your place, that you can leave and still be whole. You don't preach it, you don't prove it, you live it. And when the world comes knocking again, in familiar faces, in recycled patterns, in the same old traps wearing new clothes, you won't fight. You'll open the door, look it in the eye, and say, I don't live there anymore, because the war is over. You didn't win it with words. You didn't win it with vengeance. You didn't win it by being louder. You won by choosing silence that nourishes instead of silence that starves. Now, when you wake up, your first thought isn't who you need to be. It's how you want to feel. And that question, soft as it sounds, changes everything. Because from this place, you don't negotiate your peace. You don't rehearse your value. You don't trade authenticity for access. You are no longer the woman who needs to be rescued. You are the one who stopped waiting. And that's the most powerful kind of woman there is. Now breathe. You've reached the end, not of the story, but of the illusion. What happens next? That's finally up to you. And this time, no one else gets to write it.